This is Josh Scott with PETA and the Pennsylvania Economic Development Institute, and I just want to welcome you this morning to our webinar, Trends in Online Site Selection and GIS Technology. Today's speakers are Anatalio, Ubalde, and Eric Simundza, GIS Technology and Zoom Prospector. They've been very active and successful in all things related to economic development and technology for some time now, as was outlined in the biographical information on our website. And I'm very pleased to be able to welcome them as today's presenters. So, gentlemen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. So, a good place to get started is really to talk about some of the changes that have happened in marketing and communication. And really in the old way of doing economic development marketing, and we put them into different boxes. And so there was advertising, there was brochures, site selection, and so on. Things like email or the web, those were just one of the many tools of advertising. What's changed is that today there is a continuum, and many of these different strategies and tactics span both the offline and online world. Some of the things have always been online, like websites and emails or blogs and social media. But you can see progressively so many of the things that were in the offline world have moved into the online world, and some of the things that we never even thought would ever be online, such as special events or familiarization tours. How do you become relevant at the moment of relevance? So this is the specific point at which a business is trying to make a decision about an investment. And that's certainly one of the advantages that the internet has.
My name is Eric. So I wanted to give you a little context of a study we were doing. So back in the summer of 2007, we surveyed EDOs to see what marketing strategies they were using, how they allocated their budgets among them, and how they perceived their effectiveness. And the results were published the next year in the book Economic Development Marketing, Present and Future. 2009, at the depths of the economic slump, we distributed a brief follow-up survey to see specifically how the budgets and attitudes of EDOs had changed in light of the downturn. Now, the economic climate is it's still a bit murky, but EDOs are beginning to ramp up their activities again. And as it had been a full 4 years after our first comprehensive survey, we felt it was time to revisit the state of economic development marketing. So we had a few main questions we wanted to answer. We want to see what has changed since the downturn, how are communities, EDOs, and site selectors responding, and what's the impact that social media is having on all this. So briefly, I'll just talk about who responded to our survey. We distributed in July of last year, and we received responses from all 50 states. Our respondents represented areas of different sizes. There are spikes at population levels from 100 to 250,000 and also from 1 to 5 million, and those are likely the regional and the state organizations. And most of our respondents were either government or EDCs, each made up about a third, while about 10% were chambers of commerce. And this is what EDOs are focused on now. Business attraction, retention, and expansion were the most prioritized activities, followed by entrepreneurial development, community and workforce development, and then marketing. So now we'll look at what the survey had to say about marketing effectiveness. So EDOs were asked how to view their marketing programs as a whole, and we found that they were more satisfied with themselves than in years past. So in 2011, EDOs were more likely to rate their programs as very effective or effective. So they seem to be happier with their results. So now we're going to try a little quiz here. What do you think was the most effective marketing strategy in our survey? Okay. All right. So it looks like there's a overwhelming winner here. It's an internet website, and you are all correct. So yes, websites were rated the most effective marketing strategy in 2011, with 82% rating as effective. That's followed by out-of-town meetings with businesses and site selection consultants. And now we're going to try and look at this over time. There's a lot happening in this chart here, but you can see there are 3 distinct points for 2007, 2009, and 2011. And this shows how the perceived effectiveness of the strategies has changed over time. You can see there's a very distinct V shape for most of these strategies. So what was happening in 2009 was there was a real drop. People were really pessimistic about most of these strategies. And this coincided with when people were slashing their budgets for marketing. So it may be an indication that they were rationalizing the cuts that they were making. And then in 2011, the perceived effectiveness of the strategies really rebounded in most cases to higher levels than in 2007. So obviously people are feeling a little bit better. So now we're going to look at budgets. So EDOs gave their highest budget allocations to websites, and this was not really a change from our last survey, but the actual percentage of the budget given to websites has risen slightly. After that, trade shows and conferences and out-of-town meetings with businesses, they both made gains in budget allocation, while slight, to claim the second and third places on this list. And this shift does represent an increasing emphasis on personal contact, sort of the high-touch strategies. Social media, while only receiving the 15th highest budget allocation, received the 7th highest effectiveness rating. So it shows that social media does not need much of a capital investment to be effective. So in this next slide here, we look at what budget items EDOs plan to increase and what they plan to decrease. So over 70% of EDOs anticipated that they would increase their spending on websites in the next 5 years. And the only other marketing strategy where the majority of EDOs were planning to increase spending was for social media at 51%. Compared to the dot-com boom days, how much do businesses spend on online advertising? So just a few options. Okay, all right. Well, it seems like most of you said less. 50% of you said they spend less than in the dot-com boom. So in the dot-com boom days, around 2000, there was $8 billion spent in online advertising. But then the bubble burst and spending dipped for the next couple of years. But after that, it grew quite a bit. We're now actually at 3 times the level of online ad spending that we were at the height of the dot-com boom. So a little bit of a surprise. Now back to this the same chart. Of all the trend lines on this chart, you can see that online advertising had a very dramatic rise in perceived effectiveness over time. And it didn't even suffer that dip in 2009. It doesn't have that V-shape that occurred for just about every other strategy. It's been a very steady rise over time. So we also wanted to know how site selectors are getting their information. So we surveyed a number of site selectors, and we heard from some of the biggest companies around. Those are just some of them. Here's a full list. And we found that the focus of site selectors was very broad. About 60% of them served multiple countries. And about a third of respondents were site selection consultants, and a little over half were corporate real estate professionals, either serving one company or multiple companies. It's a little testy here. And you can see that our respondents were primarily key decision makers at the executive level. So the number one source of information for site selectors for gathering information about communities was brokers, followed by websites of EDOs and third-party data sources. Back in 2007, websites were ranked below third-party data sources, so the numbers show that websites are gaining in importance. So now I'm going to shift to actually a different study. Business Facilities Magazine recently conducted a survey of how site selectors use media. And since they asked some questions that we didn't cover, I'm just going to show you a couple of slides from a recent presentation of theirs. So they looked at location directories and found that the majority of site selectors utilize online location directories. They also asked site selectors what the most important features were for a location directory. Contact information ranked highest, followed by available properties and market data. So business facilities also asked what were the most important aspects of a location when making a site selection decision. They found that the most important aspects were cost of labor, transportation infrastructure, quality of life, and low energy costs. So now we're going to look back at our survey to see what site selectors value. We asked where they get the most valuable information and what kind of information they want. So we found that site selectors rated websites the most effective way of communicating with EDOs, ahead of meeting with EDOs directly. And so some of you may think that's surprising. In some ways it is. But we think it boils down to the issue of convenience, since site selectors can use websites whenever they want, but they can't get a familiarization tour whenever they want. And the biggest change from our surveys in terms of what is effective with site selectors was for online advertising. In 2011, they ranked that as a much more valuable things. And this may be partly due to the fact that online advertising reaches people at that moment of relevance. And so if you're looking at content related to real estate, most likely the ads you will see will also be related to that topic that you're interested in. And site selectors may appreciate getting messages about problems that you're trying to solve at that moment in time. So this is what information site selectors like to see on EDO websites. You can see there's demographics, labor force, incentives, employers, and maps. And looking what's changed over the last 4 years, site selectors are more interested now in finding out about the businesses that are in communities, and also they want to be able to do transactions online, such as obtaining licenses and permits, and et cetera. So by the time a long list of locations is selected, how much more have corporate real estate professionals communicated with websites as compared to directly contacting EDOs? This is on average. So give your votes. That was the winner. So actually, it was quite a bit more than that. 133% more people have looked at websites than have contacted EDOs directly. All right, so we wanted to see when businesses are making contact, and we found that here in this chart, the blue represents direct contact with EDO staff. So that's through phone or email or visiting. And the green is when they're visiting the website. And you can see that they're more likely to visit the website than make personal contact, especially in the beginning of the process. So it shows that if communities are not providing their information online, they may be getting eliminated from consideration without even knowing that they were considered in the first place. So here's another way of looking at this. This is looking specifically at when businesses are contacting EDOs, making direct contact, and it's over time. So the solid blue is in 2011, and the dashed blue is in 2007. And you can see that more site selectors today are not contacting EDOs at all. Greater percentages of site selectors today said that they never contact EDOs, or if they do, it's only if the client specifically asks them to contact an EDO. Okay, so now we're going to look at website features. So here is what's creating the highest value and effectiveness on ED websites. So you can see there's land sites and buildings inventory is number 1, followed by labor force, demographics, infrastructure, and maps, business clusters. So that's what EDOs think is important. Here's what they actually have. So in green is what economic developers have, and in blue is what they plan to add. So most EDOs have staff directory and contact information, hyperlinks, demographics, and maps. Some of the newer items are things like social media integration and mobile formatting. And they're not implemented on many websites now, but you can see they have large blue bars there. So it means that large percentages of EDOs plan to add these things soon. So back in 2007, about a third of EDOs had interactive features for maps, site selection analysis assistance, and demographic reports. And at the time, it looked like there would be a tipping point in 2 to 5 years. As our data showed, you can see here that the majority of EDOs plan to have these interactive features within 2 to 5 years. So now in 2011, we seem to be on track to make good on that prediction. So almost half of all EDOs now have interactive maps and site selection analysis assistance, which is over a 10% increase from 2007. So the tipping point is likely to be within the next year. You can see in red here. And at that point, organizations that don't have these interactive features will be at a competitive disadvantage where they need to play catch-up. So here's just an example of a site selection analysis assistance website. We'll look into those more in just a few minutes. 81% of economic developers said that a GIS-based site selection tool would be helpful for their work, which was up from 77% in 2007. Less than half of EDOs have such a system now, but within 5 years, 76% of EDOs will be providing this type of service. Now, EDOs are now much more likely to include analytics on their website to track who's visiting their websites. Back in 2007, 29% of EDOs said that they do not track visitors to their websites at all, and now that figure's down to only 2%. EDOs are now also more likely to use analytics services that are designed specifically for economic development. But on the downside, we did find that EDOs are less active when it comes to updating the content on their websites.
In terms of GIS, basically the simplest way I could kind of explain what it is just imagine you have digital maps, and when you combine them with databases, you can do a lot of very powerful spatial analysis, and I'll show you some examples of that. I'll show some of the data here that Eric just mentioned. This is looking at what are the most valuable website features. In red are the things that GIS systems are addressing and answering. You all are very fortunate in the state of Pennsylvania because the state of Pennsylvania has a statewide GIS system. What I'm going to show you, though, is an example of what you can do with a GIS at the local or regional economic development level. What the GIS systems can do is they can answer some important questions, such as whether the business can succeed through sites and buildings, the demographics, the industries, and the geographic advantages, and I'll show you that now. So the first question is there available property for my business? Because if there's a business that wants to locate in your community, well, there needs to be a place for them to go. So either a vacant building or a piece of land. And this is an example of where you can search for properties. So someone coming to this website, they open up this page, they can enter in the parameters of the properties that they're looking for, and then you get those results. Or you can, as shown in this example, there's an area in red where you can draw specifically where you want to search on the map. Down below you can see the properties that match. You can use scrolling controls similar to iPhone where it kind of moves the properties across, and then you get different results and more results. When you find a property and get additional information, so this is one of the properties at 3 Robinson Plaza, and you can get detailed information about the property, including the contact person. Now, one of the ideas here is how do you remove the friction and how do you make the process of getting a business into your community as fast as possible? Well, get them connected to the people who can help them move into that building. So here's general information about that location. Down below you'll actually see a map of that location and a QR code, as well as social media. So you could share this property. You can also view the area with Google Street View, so you could actually take a virtual tour of the area right on the Economic Development website. You can also take the documents and export them into PDF, Excel, or Word. If you're using them for a report or you're putting it together in a proposal, economic developers, site selectors, or the businesses themselves can use the data that they find on the website. So that's the first thing. The second major issue is you've got to identify if it's the right characteristics and the right market for the business, especially including things like are the right people available to work for that business. So in this case, we're still on that property report. You can also change the distance because each business is going to be different and how far people will come to work will be different or come to shop or things like that. So you can modify it in radius and miles or drive time. And here's some of the types of data that you get, as I mentioned, population, sex, age, race, and so on. However, one thing that's important to know is that all of this data is updated. This is not census data. You're getting new data each year because a business isn't going to want to make $1 million decision, let alone a multi-million-dollar decision based on old data. You can also save all of these reports. What are the types of businesses and industries that are in the area? Because those businesses may represent customers or competitors. They might be people that you could work with or develop products together with, or you might just not want to be near them. And it really varies by business. So for example, if let's say you're a dentist and you want to locate somewhere, you might want to be the only one in your neighborhood so you can get all of the customers. Or maybe you want to be at the dental building because that's where everybody knows to go to dentists, and you can refer for your patients to orthodontists, or they can refer back and forward. So it really varies. I'll show you an example of how you can do some of that analysis. What it does is it maps the businesses by industry. So you can see it color-coded up at the top, and down below you can see what those specific industries are. Here you can see the competitions and synergies nearby, and here it's listed tabularly. So let's modify the report so we can get a little bit more analysis. Say we're interested within 5 miles all the professional, scientific, and technical service companies. So you pick those categories, and now you're mapping just that specific industry. And it becomes pretty clear where there are higher concentrations of those types of businesses relative to the property that's being considered. Fourth major issue, and this is the thing where you all have significant advantage, is convincing them of why your location is the right one. And you can do that through showing your geographic advantages. So here you can show it by terrain. Here you can see images by satellite. Here you can see a typical map. But you can also overlay information. So let's say you want to show where the areas have the highest concentration of income. You can show the boundaries of your area. You can show points of interest, in this case of rail.
All right, so now we're going to look a little bit at mobile trends. As others have written before, we're now in the fifth major technology cycle, and that's carried over from the past decade, and that's of mobile computing. Now I'm going to show you some slides that are a bit outdated, maybe about a year. So just the numbers you're going to see, it's even going to be more dramatic now. In May 2010, 38% of mobile phone users accessed the internet, which was a 52% increase in 13 months. It's surely higher now. About half of all adults get local news or information on a cell phone or tablet computer. That's also most likely higher. See here, over half of adults in this country own laptops, and over 85% own cell phones. Here we see that tablet ownership is highest with younger adults. That's no surprise. It also hints that in the future this kind of technology will be more important. I think I saw recently that 30% of adults now own tablets. So now location-based services are services that take advantage of the GPS location of a user, usually from that user's mobile phone. So Foursquare, Yelp, and Facebook, they all offer ways for users to check into local businesses, and also sometimes to search among them. And by checking in, they can notify their friends where they've been and also gain access to promotional deals from merchants. So these services are great opportunities for businesses in your community to promote themselves and to establish really their own community of patrons. So you should really try to work with these businesses, especially the more technophobic ones, to make sure that they have a presence on these services. We're going to talk a little bit about mobile formatting and QR codes. Mobile formatting, it's a way that you can make websites change their appearance so that if the website senses it's being viewed on a mobile phone, it will reformat. And so this is something that can really enhance the experience of the website for people that are on the go and who may actually be in your community when they're viewing the website. And it also highlights the functionality that's most appropriate for someone that is on a mobile phone that's not sitting at a computer. So EDOs are already taking advantage of this trend. I'm going to show you an example. So here's an example of the site selection website, just like what Anatalio was showing you. So it's possible. There's a lot of information here, but it's possible to take this. So it's a matter of condensing the website to reformat to fit on the screen. This is what the Greater Oklahoma City Chamber has done. Basically format the websites so that they fit on the screen and look good on the screen. You can show property search, matching properties, property reports, and it's all formatted so that it looks appropriate for the small screen. You can get a sense of how this website will look on a small screen. QR codes, they're known as quick response codes. They're developed by the automotive industry. They're very similar to barcodes, but they can store a bit more information. And one thing they're good for is storing website links. You can store them so that they can then be scanned by a mobile phone's camera. And so a good strategy is to think about ways that you can place them on things like websites, but also signs or print advertising, so that the person viewing the code can take it with them wherever they're going. So Anatalio already kind of showed you how this can work, but here's an example of just a website with a property report. You have the QR code on the bottom there. It allows the business owner or the site selector to easily take that information on the go, perhaps to visit that particular site or that property.
You can also do with QR codes is, I mean, the whole idea is how do you get people in the non-online world back to your website? Using these QR codes, you can provide them to your commercial real estate agents and brokers. They can actually print out a report for this property, place it on the location of the property, and people who come by can just scan the QR code, and it will take them directly to your website, to this specific property report. So not just to anywhere on your website, but this specific property. So that's another advantage of using the QR codes to bridge the online and offline world.
Okay, so now we're going to look at social media. First, we'll see what our survey had to say about it. So 56% of EDOs have social media integrated into their website, but 28% plan to implement this in 5 years, and that's the third highest total of all website features in terms of what people plan to add. Here we see where people are spending their time in the internet, and you can see that people are spending time on social networks and blogs more than any other activity. This category is also growing the fastest with a 43% increase in time spent from 2009 to 2010. So now we're going to look back at some of our survey results. We asked which social media strategies EDOs engage in and found that 73% of EDOs have Facebook pages, 58% have Twitter accounts, and 56% have a LinkedIn group for their organization. But it's not enough to create a social media account. To get any real benefit out of a social media presence, it's important to engage frequently and make use of its real-time nature. So 20% of economic developers use Facebook and Twitter on a daily basis, and 15% use LinkedIn. So these numbers they're still fairly low, could stand to increase. When asked to rate which communication strategies for economic development were most effective, economic developers gave the highest ratings to LinkedIn, followed by Facebook, video sharing, and Twitter. So these effectiveness ratings are considerably lower than the percentage of EDOs that are engaging in them. So there's still certainly some skepticism about the effectiveness of these channels among the organizations that are engaging in them. We should keep in mind when looking at the results that we're still at an early adoption stage. So as EDOs become more comfortable and proficient in these strategies, and as the business community's involvement on these platforms grow, we expect EDOs to have more success with social media. So we also conducted a separate survey of site selectors and asked how they use social media. So we found that site selectors spend 23 minutes per day engaging with social media for work compared to 26 minutes for economic developers. 61% of site selectors agreed that social media will grow in importance in their jobs in the coming years, and site selectors were found to utilize LinkedIn and blogs more than EDOs. So that's some of the results from our survey. So I was going to give you a little more information about these particular strategies.
This was one of the statistics that really surprised us. We actually thought that perhaps site selectors weren't using social media much, but 23 minutes a day is actually a pretty significant amount of time. And our question to them was specifically, use for work. This is not including whatever time they spend for personal social media time. So one of the things to really consider when you're thinking about social media is how it impacts the final decision makers. Economic developers have primarily tried to reach either the most powerful influencers or the mass population. The mass population through traditional advertising, and then the most powerful influencers through public relations. Every one of us probably wanted to be in the Wall Street Journal or Forbes, Fortune, Inc., Business Week, something like that. But of course that's hard to control what the message is, and the likelihood of getting your community into these publications is challenging. What social media does is it provides an opportunity to reach the people who are the influencers of the final decision makers, which include people like domain experts, online community fire starters, thought leaders, and opinion makers. Because they're less in demand, you can reach them, and their opinions will affect the final decision makers. There are 3 things you better get used to when it comes to social media and just in economic development in general. The first is that there's a greater expectation in information happening in real time. As an example, Twitter, it is a real-time search engine where all of the information is happening, like the other social media, because people are posting 24 hours a day. And those expectations have impacts on us as economic developers. The second issue is loss of control. I've met lots of economic developers who are kind of information control freaks, and they think that they can control all of the conversations that are happening about their community, or they can hide some of these types of like the warts of the community. But in fact, that's not possible, because what happens is that with social media, everyone has a microphone and anyone can speak, and so our choice is we can either engage in that conversation or it can happen without us. The third major trend is that communication is a team effort. For those of you who are directors or presidents of your organization, this is not something you can just hand off to your marketing person and say, okay, you handle the social media, because social media is social. And people want to hear multiple voices, everyone from your intern to your CEO or director. Now I'll talk about some of the different social media platforms and how you can leverage them for economic development. We'll start with Facebook. So here you can see that Facebook has just grown significantly, and when you compare it to some of the other social media platforms, just the sheer numbers make you have to take a look at it as something to consider. It launched in 2004. As you can see, its growth was like a hockey stick. One of the challenges that economic developers have had is that they sometimes get confused about how to use Facebook as an organization. And so when I ask the question, you're asking people to friend your business. Well, friending is for personal Facebook accounts, and which are different than Facebook pages. So people have profiles and businesses have pages. And we should think of ourselves in the category of being a business. So this is an example of a personal or a profile page. This is mine. And this is different. This is an example of a Facebook page for an economic development organization. It's very simple to create a Facebook page for your organization. It just takes a few minutes. When you go to facebook.com, you'll look at the bottom of the page and you'll see a link where it says create a page for a celebrity, band, or business. And that's what we fall under because we're all economic development celebrities. So that's really, you just go in, you sign up. I'll show you some elements of the Facebook page. So this is the Facebook page for Greater Oklahoma City Chamber, and you can see they have organization logo, links to information, the number of people who like the organization, a like button, which changes the number that you see on the left-hand side of the screen, links, and these used to be called tabs, but Facebook changed the layout of the screen. The wall, just like on your personal profile or your personal page, you also have a wall. Here's some things that you can share to encourage your audience to engage with your Facebook page. So in this case, Greater Oklahoma City, they're saying, you know, don't forget this networking event that we're having tonight. Or inviting discussion about what the community needs. So, you know, what retail does Oklahoma City need? Or here in Laramie, someone actually posted a thank you to the EDC for recognizing them. You can also share positive news articles. In this case, they're saying Wyoming ranks 3rd in business tax-friendly climate. Here in the Lincoln EDA, they've posted photos. And this is really great. Here's somebody who doesn't really understand what economic developers do, and they say, well, what are business missions? What do you do? And it provides the organization the opportunity to engage these people and educate them, you know, because if you do, you're likely to have a supporter of economic development. So they say the business missions consist of 3 things. They allow us to meet with companies who have an interest, we meet with major site selection consultants, and so on. They also post videos to their Facebook page. So the links which I mentioned are places that you can add more information. And these are some examples. You could add videos to your Facebook page. You can add photos. You can add events so that people can just add these events to directly to their calendar. You can add RSS or a blog link so that people can request updates about what's going on with your organization. You can also add email sign-up. So this is another way where you're getting permission. It's permission-based marketing because they're giving you permission to send them emails. They're asking for you to engage them. This is an example of adding demographics and property search. And even you can add music. There's an example in Michigan where somebody has the song Buy Michigan. So there's even economic development music out there. Here are 3 ways you can improve your Facebook page and stand out from the crowd. First, claim your vanity URL. In this case, you can customize it so it says facebook.com/LinkedIn-EDA. You can use a custom landing page. This, you just have to have someone that knows how to do programming on Facebook. These are examples of what economic development organizations have done to change the home page of their Facebook page. This one is saying, you know, we're awesome. The number one reason you like our page, and you see the fingers actually pointing up to the button where people can click like. The other is to use Facebook apps, and there are 2 Facebook apps specifically for economic development. You can get to both of them from facebook.com/ZoomProspector, and these will be available in approximately 2 weeks. And these are the 2 options. So if you want to add demographics, whatever city or county you're in, you can add demographics right into your Facebook page. This is an example of New Braunfels, Texas, and the demographics now are available right through Facebook. You can see some of the data that's available. Or properties. Now you are all in a very good position because you can all add properties to your Facebook page because the state of Pennsylvania has a GIS system that's compatible with the Facebook application. So you see, you just enter in your organization, these are the steps that you take, and then property search happens right within your Facebook page. So this is available, as I mentioned, to everybody on the call. Now let's talk about LinkedIn for economic development. So LinkedIn, just tons of business people who are on it. 45% are business decision makers and executives from all Fortune 500 companies. Talk about 4 basic topics, and I'll talk about you first. You are very likely in the future to, I guess the traditional way is you want a job, you try to identify through your connections, how can you talk to whoever, or they can make a recommendation for you at that job, or it's something you could apply to. But in the future, because it's enabled through technologies like LinkedIn, you can get found through LinkedIn. So maybe somebody identifies that you're the type of candidate that they want based on the information available that you posted on LinkedIn. And then they can look through LinkedIn to see how they are connected to you. And they may be doing reference checks on you without you even knowing that that's happening. So your next job may actually come to you instead of you finding it. This is an example of a profile on LinkedIn. This is my profile, and you can see some of the basic information highlighted in the blue box, a summary of who I am, and then more detailed information below. And these are examples of recommendations and the groups that I'm a part of. The more information you add, the better for you, because the more connectability, the more connections, so that you can talk to people that you want to talk to, who know that you're connected to them by somebody they know, and also just that people can find you more easily. I encourage you all to give recommendations, oftentimes because that results in getting recommendations back. You can give recommendations for former managers, colleagues and coworkers, customers and clients, and certainly business partners. There's a lot of value, especially as you are, if you're pursuing specific industries, because those, when somebody else from that industry sees your profile, they'll see that there was someone who was one of their peers that respects the work that you do. Let's talk about how your organization can use LinkedIn. So these are examples of company profiles, which are different than personal profiles on LinkedIn. So here you can see some of the elements. There's an overview that they explain who their organization is. LinkedIn knows who the current employees are, so they just place that in there. And there's also statistics about the organization. And it's very easy to add your company. You see when you're under companies, there is an add company link. Just press that. You can fill out information about your organization. This is an example of a less filled out company profile. You can see the difference here with LinkedIn, where it has a logo and a description, and here it doesn't. This is an example of what happens if there isn't a company profile at all. So if you type in, or as I did, the North Dakota Department of Commerce, I know there's some really good quality folks there, but they just haven't set up the company profile at the time that I did this analysis. You can also join groups for business attraction and expansion. And this is an example, I mean, whatever your targeted industries are, there's got to be a LinkedIn group for it. So if you're targeting biotech, there's over 1,000 groups that you could join. And not a lot of economic developers are doing this. So you can really stand out from the crowd and help businesses learn about why biotech could be successful in your community. Okay, so now let's talk about LinkedIn for your community. You can also create your own group. This is an example of a group that Metro Denver started, and a lot of the conversations are about things that are more local. And this is an opportunity for you to, if you're trying to bounce ideas off of local folks or you just want to share information, this is a great way to have a conversation online and get immediate information. Talk about you as an economic developer. You can benefit from LinkedIn. One of the ways is by joining economic development groups. So if you go to the groups tab and you type in economic development, you'll find these are the 3 largest economic development LinkedIn groups. Actually, now there's another one, ED 2.0. So these are the larger ones. This is one that we manage. If you click on it, you can see information about the group, who you know, and who's in it. It's very likely with all of these that they're people that you know and who are your friends. This is an example of the type of content you get inside of it. So these are some of the conversations people are having about economic development. So sometimes you're just trying to get ideas or trying to get feedback on something you're working on or trying to solve a problem. So in this case, Aaron's saying, has anyone developed a webinar to site selectors as opposed to face-to-face meetings in an effort to reduce costs? So this is also more evidence that even familiarization tours are becoming virtual. One of the other benefits you personally get from posting and responding is that thousands of your peers see your name and knowledge. Because what happens, and if you're on LinkedIn, you know this, you get updates of what's happening in those groups. And if you're mentioning something, whether you've posted something or you're responding, they see that you're an expert, and that can make a big difference when it comes time for your next job. So that takes you back to you as an entrepreneur, because doing those things as an economic developer really helps you in your own professional and personal development. Lastly, I'll talk about Twitter, because it's one of the things that a lot of folks have generally been confused about, because it's microblogging, where you can tweet less than 140 characters. Twitter has just really exploded in terms of use. I think it took them about 3 years to have 8 billion tweets, and now I think they get 1 billion tweets, I don't know, I think it's like every week. This is an example of our Twitter account, and there are certain elements of it, although actually the interface has changed a bit. So these are examples of things that are in our tweets that we've sent out. You can see the number of folks that we're following, the numbers who are following us. People have put us as part of their list. This is where you type in the information. The box up here shows how many characters you have left before you hit your limit. And you can also see in Twitter who's mentioning you. This is an example of anybody who's been talking about us. You can also use hashtags. So you see this hashtag here, so you can search on specific topics. So if there's a specific, let's say an industry that you're following, or there's a company that you're interested in, you can, in the search box, you can type in hashtag and whatever that thing is. Probably the most popular hashtag for economic development is hashtag econdev, actually not hashtag economic development. Twitter can also give you recommendations about people you may be interested in following. This was interesting when we took this screen capture. It was about a year or 2 ago. Strangely enough, last year, this guy, David Zach, who they said, I should probably follow, was the guy who introduced me when I gave a talk at a conference. So Twitter is pretty smart. Here are 5 ways economic development organizations can use Twitter. One is you can share positive information about your community. So this is an example of where Metro Denver say, Solar Energy Systems just opened up a new office. These are other examples of other economic development organizations sharing good news. You can also take part in conversations. So this is an example where Next AMP News is telling the Economic Development Organization that they had a great event. And then the Economic Development Organization replies saying, this Next AMP News had 200% job growth. So you're engaging in a dialogue that creates social capital. Yeah, that's great. I mean, you want to be in conversations with your local businesses, as well as the businesses that are outside of your community. As I mentioned, you can take part in conversations. This is an example of somebody who, Buffalo Niagara Enterprise, who said something quite nice to us, and we responded. You can start conversations. So maybe there's an issue that you're trying to figure out. What skills do your employees need? Would our community college providing that training be helpful? People can get back to you and respond. You can get real-time feedback. And this is an example of generating social capital through retweets. So Inc. magazine actually was talking about a site selection tool that we built called Zoom Prospector, and they're saying, looking to relocate Zoom Prospector as your bird's eye view. I am an amazing site. I assume that's a little bit of a typo, but the point is that this guy, Braden Douglas, who I don't know who he is at all, retweeted something nice about us, and he certainly has some social capital for me, and I might retweet something that he says. You can also promote businesses from within your community. So this is an example of a ribbon cutting that they're announcing. Or check out this article about our newest tenant in the downtown center. Also, you can combine online and offline. This is an example of where there was an article about Chattanooga having the fastest internet service in the country in the New York Times. Well, that was in the print edition, but it was also in the online version. And as a result, it got a massive amount of tweets that went out. And within 24 hours, it had 9.8 million impressions. So online and offline work well together. So some of you may know this story because it happened out of Pennsylvania, and this is one of the kind of the less happy stories of using social media in economic development. There was an economic developer who tweeted out a message about some of their organization staff leaving work early to play golf, and it was so popular that it made its way all the way to the Today Show, and it ended up costing the economic developer her job. And it got so much media attention, not even locally, but with social media, people can comment all the time, and in this case, some of the local community were saying, well, is economic development a seasonal type of job? And then people questioning the spending of dollars on economic development. And I don't think that that's anything that we want. When it comes to social media, you don't have to have the same tone as something you would say in public or in a city council meeting, but you have to assume that it's just as public. So whatever you say, assume everybody's listening, because that's how social media is designed. Now, all the social media information may be a little bit confusing, but I'll leave you with one last thought, which is that economic developers, you can really ride the S-curve of these platforms that other people have built. It's not like you have to create all of the effort to get somebody to your website. People are already on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Google+. All you have to do is engage, and you can really benefit from what they've developed. So at that point, I will open it up for any questions you might have of Eric and me. The question is, who's updating the data annually for labor force? And I'm guessing that question was related to when I was showing the GIS data, us, that updates that data every year, and that's through a lot of data that we license. It varies. Some people's web pages, they just update the labor force data themselves by looking at some of the data. But one of the challenges with data is, how often is it coming out? You can't wait every 10 years for census data to come out, because businesses just don't want 10-year-old data. Do you have a percentage of how many users are searching retail, commercial, office, industrial, etc. The answer to that is yes. There are analytics that are connected into these GIS site selection tools so that you can know, really what the market is. What are people interested in? What are they looking for? And that's data that, for example, the state of Pennsylvania has access to, and also the data that, in the case that we showed there, the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance has access to. Eric, why don't you go ahead and just tell a little bit about yourself?
Working at GIS Planning for about 3 years. I'm a product manager for ZoomProspector.com, as well as those Facebook apps that you were seeing, and also a new product we have called SizeUp. That's a business intelligence tool. That's another free tool that I suggest people look at. It allows any small business to benchmark their business against industry competitors, map their buyers, suppliers, and competitors, and also to find the best place to advertise. It's a new tool that we've just launched in the fall, and we're very excited about it. It's a new sort of service, and we're really excited about where it's going.
I'm Anatalio Ubalde. I'm a co-founder of GIS Planning, Zoom Prospector, and SizeUp. I've been working in economic development for a number of years, and I've been teaching courses on economic development marketing since about 1998. Eric and I actually have a book that we co-wrote on economic development marketing. I'm also on the board of directors of IEDC, and I seem to live on an airplane going everywhere to give talks, so I'm really glad that I was able to give this one by webinar. One of the questions that came in was a question about Facebook, and the question is, when is Facebook going to start charging for their capabilities? It seems inevitable. Well, they're not going to charge as long as they're making money off their current business model. With both companies like Facebook and Google, their business model is really based on connecting advertisers primarily to the people who use their service. And there's so many people that are using their service. It's just an amazing way for businesses to reach the right people at that moment of relevance. That's certainly the case with Google, right? Every time you type something in and you're searching on something, whether you're searching on a car or whatever you want to buy, there are businesses that want to place an ad in front of them just at that moment. It's a lot more efficient than putting an advertisement about a car in front of somebody who just bought a car and they're not going to be interested. Well, one of the advantages with Facebook is that they're able to have really targeted demographic targeting of ads, because they already know a huge amount about you. They know how old you are. They know where you live. They know what your gender is. They know what you like. They know where you went to college. They know who your friends are. And the reason they know all this is because you've told them. So that's a way and a reason that they're able to provide their services for free because of their business model. But that's an opportunity for us as economic developers, is to use these platforms to also be able to reach the businesses and the decision makers and the influencers that we want to talk to.
Yeah, so even if they don't charge for their services for the end user, they're still going to be making oodles of money, as they already have been.
So the next question is basically it's asking about how site selection specialists seem to look to the web first, and are there economic development organizations that have so much information that they're not keeping up with that information? So, well, the issue with site selectors is that a lot of especially for the big projects, a lot of the work that they're doing is confidential. And so the more that they're able to gather information online, the easier it is for them for that to be confidential. The other issue that's a major shift in how they do what they do is before I'm talking, maybe just 10 years ago, when they were considering communities, they really, because technology wasn't available, there's only so many communities that they could review and analyze and kick the tires of, so to speak. And then a shorter list, of course, of the ones that they would go visit. But what the internet has enabled them to do is they don't have to start with a relatively short list of communities. They can start with thousands because the data allows them to do that. What I'm hearing from a lot of economic developers, and the analysis that Eric presented in the survey bears out, is the issue that there are communities, and again, we're hearing this from economic developers, that when they don't include the type of information the site selectors are looking for on the website, that just gives the site selector an easy reason to eliminate them. It's not to say that that community isn't the right one, but if they've got to pour through tons of data and they're trying to eliminate communities anyway, that's happening. And as you saw from the chart, that communication is happening on the website before they talk to organizations. So organizations are getting eliminated before they even knew they were in consideration. What I don't think economic developers should be concerned about is this issue of giving too much information on the website. There was a fear, especially when I was teaching courses in the late 90s, where people say, well, I don't want to give too much information because then they won't call me. Well, that doesn't really happen. What happens is you're giving information that causes them to call you. I mean, you're not going to be able to answer every question online, but if you give enough information, hopefully you make the short list, or you really kind of motivate them to call you next.
There's a question about how much time or money should be invested in social media to gain a good following. Just want to point back to one particular slide. It kind of showed that social media really can be effective without a lot of investment in terms of money. Certainly the time that you spend on your social media is up to discretion, but one of the nice things about it is that it doesn't really require much capital investment to get it going. But in terms of time, maybe I'll tell you have some insight on that, but it really does depend. To a certain degree, you want to be able to research what's going on using the social media tools and respond when you see fit, as well as promoting your own activities.
My view is don't do anything that doesn't deliver results. Don't spend any time doing anything that isn't successful for you. I mean, assuming you're doing it correctly. I mean, you could get bad results doing, the right strategy incorrectly. But with social media, I would encourage everybody to take some time and experiment. The more you use it, the more you'll become comfortable with it, the more you'll realize what works and doesn't. When I was a person who, when people explained Twitter to me, I was like, I don't get it. Like, who are we talking to exactly, and who's listening to us? But then the more I used it, the more it became really obvious how powerful it is. One thing that is, to the question of how much time should you spend, one thing that we didn't know until we did this recent survey is to have a benchmark so that people could understand how much their peers were spending online doing social media. And I thought that maybe the number would come back at 5-10 minutes a day, but it came back a lot more. I don't remember the number just right off the top of my head.
I think it was about 26 minutes per day.
So if you're wondering how much time you should spend, that's tough to answer, but we can tell you the amount of time your peers are spending is about 26 minutes a day. And then, again, that's on work-related social media, not personal social media. And actually it encourages, something that we didn't talk about in this presentation is the use of Google Analytics. So Eric did talk about how economic developers are tracking use on their websites. Well, Google Analytics is a terrific tool, and it's free. All you have to do is add a line of code into your website, and you can track all that information. The other thing is a recommendation to use QR codes. Those are the ones that Eric talked about, and says it's fun. And I'll read a quote. Get a shirt with your EDC's company QR code on it, and people can scan you. Which actually I think is a fantastic idea. If any of you actually have a T-shirt like that, please send us a picture. We will aggressively promote it in future presentations. There's another question related to what's the investment to add GIS at the local level, and the answer to that is that it varies. It typically depends on the size of the community. The range is all over the place. There's a question about microsites. So the way that Pittsburgh set up their tool is as a microsite. Now microsites are going to grow more and more, not just for GIS, but there are economic development organizations that are creating microsites, essentially independent websites for all sorts of different things. I see ones that are designed for biotechnology. There's an independent website for auto manufacturing in their community, or they just cover a lot of different industries or specific uses. And I think that that's going to grow more and more, because the idea is how do you continue to specialize the information and content to very distinct audiences, so they don't have to actually go through all the rest of your website to find the information that's relevant for them. However, on the GIS side, it's not an either or. And in fact, we have some clients where they've created the GIS as a microsite, but they've also taken that exact same content and embedded it within the local economic development organization's website. So the concern that the person asked the question is, well, I don't want to take them off of my website. Well, the technology exists so that you don't have to do that. You can actually take the GIS and put it right within it. The question is, how many communities and clients do we have in Pennsylvania? I don't know the number off the top of my head. We work with a number of communities in Pennsylvania, including the state of Pennsylvania. But the question is asking, do small communities use this type of technology? And in fact, we have clients who have populations under 10,000 who have GIS systems. And we also have clients that are, the city of Los Angeles, or the state of Pennsylvania, where you're talking about many millions of people. So GIS and site selection it's not just for large organizations, it's for everyone. Although there's certainly a lot of the regional organizations that are very aggressive in implementing the tools. At the end of the day, businesses are trying to figure out, why should I do business in your community? And the GIS systems can help answer that question for them. Eric and I really enjoy sharing information with our fellow economic developers. We think that we all get smarter from doing this work together, and I learn a lot from the questions that get asked. So we really enjoy the work that we do in Pennsylvania and giving the webinar today. Eric, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to share.
I was just want to say thanks for having us this morning. Yeah, this is fun. Seems like there was a lot of good feedback. People were engaged. I'm glad people participated in the polls and all of that. And yeah, this is fun.
And this is Josh again. I just want to thank both of you again for participating today. Feel very fortunate to have had the opportunity, and thanks everybody. And we appreciate you being a part of today's session.